Welcome to this businesstraining.com video module on letter to the editor, definition and overview. So, what is a letter to the editor? From MediaMiser.com, a letter written for and sent to a newspaper or magazine to present an organization's position, make a correction, or respond to another story or letter. Some other definitions that I was able to find online were really talking about the letter to the editor being written primarily for the reason to get it published. Now, while that is an end goal of a letter to the editor, for the purposes of a PR professional, they are more meant to correct, share, or respond to a story, not always with the intent of being published. Instead, they are meant to ask for a correction to be made or to ask for a rewrite to be published by the magazine or newspaper and the writer or journalist themselves. So not always do we request that the letter be published, but really to get the correct information portrayed one way or another. Now, being aware of what's being said about you, which is the whole, background to how you even create a letter to the editor, gives you an advantage over the companies who really see little importance in doing so. Some benefits of monitoring word of mouth or, publications about your company include the ability to respond when something said about you is inaccurate or improperly portrayed, the ability to compliment, share, or congratulate when you enjoy an article written about you or your client, the ability to react to complaints from customers or clients, and overall the ability to curb or avoid a crisis. Now, letter to the editor is usually used to respond when something about you is said inaccurately or improperly, which is something I already covered, but it's also used to compliment and share or congratulate when you enjoy an article. And doing so for the latter situation is a great way to perpetuate and promote good word of mouth and can really help to encourage a positive rapport with the media who covered your company. Now, components of a letter to the editor, and this is an important part to cover from the Public Relations Writer's Handbook by Mary Aronson, Don Spetner, and Carol Ames. There includes some great rules of thumb when considering writing a letter to the editor. Now, when writing a letter to the editor to correct a mistake, be sure to include the date and location of the incorrect article, the information that was incorrectly printed, the correct information that should have been printed instead, and the name and title of the writer of the letter. And now these are also things that you can include for a letter of praise. Include the date and location of the correct article, the information that you particularly enjoyed, where you agreed or maybe want to really congratulate them on their conclusion, and the name and title of the writer of the letter. So this is a great way to also share your praise. Now, there are some good times to use a letter to the editor and maybe some not so good times, but these are times where you can use them, again, to thank or praise an article well written, or as a congratulatory note on an interesting article, letters to correct or ask for a correction to be made, and to criticize tactfully or professionally a reporter's conclusions. And this is really in opposition of number one, to share your point of view or where you maybe disagree about someone, writing about your company poorly or even writing about you correctly. These are all ways and reasons letter to the editor can be used, but they become more difficult to create as the list goes on. The more difficult to draft is the last, of course, which is a letter to criticize a conclusion. Now, when a client of yours or yourself as a PR professional is outraged about their brand's, scandal, for example, being talked about, if true, they may demand a letter be sent for publication. And you can do so, but in a more professional manner than your client would opt for. But there are a lot of things to remember when writing a letter to criticize a reporter's conclusion. When writing to criticize a conclusion, you really need to stick to these following recommendations. Avoid being emotional. Support your statements with facts. Keep your letter brief, avoid litigation, make yourself and your opinion clear and succinct so that's easily understood, state your case in a professional and tactful manner, and maintain a good rapport and relation with the media. Now, the Public Relations Writer's Handbook states that, your client may want to really avoid number 7, but that's a great way to cut yourself off from ties with the media. Even if it's a relationship started on something where you're upset, it can still be a good relation that you continue to have in the future, especially when something good comes around. And you being professional, mature, and really to the point and tactful with this can create a better relationship out of the entire situation. Now, keep in mind that a critical letter to the editor is really to be used with caution. If you do send a critical letter, try not to alienate the author or media with abuse emotionally and over critically in-depth comments. Moreover, if a story or article features a critical aspect of your company that was true, do not write a letter to the author about it. This may perpetuate things and really draw more attention to the story. Letters to the editors can be great tools, however. It can show the media that you are in tune with what they and other media outlets are writing about. It can also improve your media relations when you send a complimentary letter to thank the author for writing the story. Lastly, this can be used as a publicity tool to present a positive positioning statement about the company's strengths versus its competitors. Letters to the editor often present excellent opportunities for positive publicity, whatever the initiating context or pretext. When not to use letters to the editor, and this sort of draws on the previous slide, critical letters. When articles talk about a negative yet true point about you or your client, writing a letter to the editor is really a great way to draw more attention to the issue at hand and can probably only create more negative press around you. Moreover, if your letter is published along with the response from the publication, there can be even more devastating results for you and your brand. And secondly, unless you've just found out a particular item, you shouldn't write an untimely response months after a publication has perhaps run an article or story about you. This can bring about more negative press if it's a negative or critical article that you wanted to write a critical letter to. And you can show people, however, in a good manner that you are aware of what's going on, as I already mentioned, and respond as soon as you're able to and as soon as you're reading and discovering the sort of news. This can also help to avoid a crisis if there is a false negative press being published, which is the number one reason I advocate that companies, small or large, pay attention to what's being said about them in this ever-expanding global world. So, make sure that you monitor what's being said about you so that you can avoid number 2 here on the screen, so that you can respond in a timely manner, and so that also you can be aware of when something untrue is being said about you and when you can evaluate if something is true being said about you. So really pay attention to what's going on in the scope of the online and offline world, and especially with things online, information is so quickly disseminated and so quickly shared that it's very hard to get a good feel for if things are good or bad if you don't monitor them. So a letter to the editor is a tool to utilize this research that you've done so that you can respond to something when needed and when you can just be aware of something when a response is not warranted. So that sums up our letter to the editor definition and overview. Thank you for watching this businesstraining.com video. I hope you've enjoyed it. To learn more about the training and certification programs that we offer, please visit our homepage at businesstraining.com.